Now, the Tobirama scaling is certainly some of the most ambiguous and contentious scaling in the entire Naruto fandom. Rightfully so, right? The history and the defeat of Tobirama is extremely ambiguous, right? Kenningen, the anti-feat by anti-Tobirama individuals, and then individuals that are pro-Tobirama say, X, Y, and Z, Ken and Gin are actually very strong, or whatever their rationalization is for his defeat, right? So extremely ambiguous and contentious as far as just how strong Tobirama is, right? And then we have the War Arc feats with Edo Tobirama being able to damage or even contend with Jubito, right? So these are my thoughts on this. When it comes to Tobirama, what I see happen a lot, and just in general in scaling with intuitively dishonest individuals, is within the entire set of empirical evidence within the Naruto narrative, people will extract a small substrata of the empirical evidence within the entire set of the narrative, and they will try to paint this intuitively dishonest narrative as far as how high someone scales. And I see this very commonly done so with Tobirama, right? People will say, well, Tobirama was able to use the tandem paper bomb jutsu and react to Jubito, and Hashirama states that, Jubito's above himself, so Tobirama must be even higher than that, right? They use these small substratas of information to try and paint this false narrative. And when you only look superficially at them, and you don't analyze and dissect the entire narrative, you can come to that conclusion, right? In an alternate dimension, in an alternate world, if that's the only empirical pieces of evidence we had, then Tobirama would scale that high. But unfortunately, for pro-Tobirama fans, that's not the case, right? So when we actually dissect and analyze the context of Tobirama's history and empirical feats, this is what we have. Jubito, or Obito in general, is an individual that began to have mental doubts within his own mind the second he met Naruto in the war. He started to see himself in Naruto when Naruto started to converse about his own ideology, right? Because Naruto represented in the narrative what Obito would have been if he never went rogue and was never mentally manipulated by Madara Uchiha, right? So what happened throughout the war is Obito had these creeping doubts, had these mental doubts that started to creep up on him as the war progressed, right? We saw this sort of mental deterioration as far as ideology is concerned throughout the war arc. And what added on top of that? The Ten Tails literally trying to pull away from his control, right? And we have empirical pieces of evidence to substantiate my claim, right? One second we see Jubito being tagged by Tobirama and company, and then the next he's blitzing Hashirama and Tobirama and the other Hokage in an instant. He's blowing them away, literally, right? So what this shows and this indicates is volatility in his scaling. It's not stagnant, right? They're not facing a consistent level of power Jubito throughout the war. They're facing a volatile power level Jubito. It's not like this. It's more so like this, right? When he blitzes all the Hokage, he's up here. When he's getting affected by Tobirama, he's down here. When he's talking to Naruto, he starts to lower. When he starts to get talked no jutsu'd, his scaling goes down as well. It's not a stagnant power level. And I would even go as far as to say is that was a very blatant plot device used to explain Obito's defeat, right? Now, if we're being honest, more than likely, if Jubito had a stagnant and consistent power level and was significantly above Hashirama, Naruto and company would have not defeated him. They would have not defeated him. They wouldn't even have contended with him. Right, so what had to be done? There had to be a plot device, a deus ex machina, if you will, for him to be defeated. Same thing with Madara. Madara couldn't even be talked no jutsu, so Kaguya had to be introduced. Right, so that's the entire narrative being analyzed. But again, like I said, people will extract substratas of empirical evidence from the entire set of empirical evidence to try and paint this intuitively dishonest narrative about how high someone scales. So the truth is, Tobirama doesn't scale that high. Now, to add on top of that, he states that Minato has a better body flicker than him. Now, I've seen some people argue that that's just travel speed. Okay, now, first of all, travel speed and combat speed are colloquial terms that the scaling community and the anime community uses, right? Now, explain to me rationally Why would Minato, Tobirama, and the Hokage take their time and use their travel speed to get to the battlefield where Minato's sun is and where the fate of the world is going to be determined at? Why would Tobirama and Minato just casually teleport there? Why would they? That doesn't make rational sense. Now, even if you do conclude they're not using their absolute maximum speed to get to the battlefield, the most rational conclusion is that Minato is still faster, right? Because if they're both using an amount of effort to get there, a substantial amount of effort to get there as quickly as possible, which is by far the most rational conclusion to come to because of the stakes at hand, then Minato is still faster, right? That's why Tobirama says it, right? Why would Tobirama say, oh, you have a better body flicker than me, casually just showing up nonchalantly? Why would he go out of his way to say that? Why would Hiruzen go out of his way to say, oh, you're as fast as ever, Minato? Why would either one say that if they're just casually showing up, just nonchalantly showing up to a battlefield where the fate of the world rests in how this battle goes? That doesn't make any sense, right? So this travel speed colloquial term, I believe, is thrown around intuitively dishonesty to try and paint this narrative that, oh, they were just casually showing up to the battlefield, so that doesn't substantiate the fact that Minato has a faster reaction time than Tobirama, or a faster activation time in his synapses than Tobirama. That's intuitively dishonest, to be quite frank, amongst most people. Some people genuinely believe that Tobirama's faster, which you can't really substantiate, honestly, with the vast amount of empirical evidence. You just can't. So, truth be told, Tobirama very, very likely is inferior to even base Hokage Minato in terms of combat speed, reaction speed, whatever colloquial term you want to use, right? He's slower than Minato, right? So essentially, his margin for error would be even smaller than Minato's. Minato's was a split-second margin of error already, right? He said this is going to come down to who hits who first when they had that altercation where they dashed at each other, right? And then Minato uses the kunai and ends up outspeeding Obito and using a Rasengan to damage him, right? Tobirama doesn't have that split-second margin of error. So if anything, the converse would be the case. Obito would have the advantage, right? Because the speed between the discrepancy in speed between Obito and Minato was already very, very narrow. Very narrow. So Tobirama more than likely is slower than 14-year-old Obito. As much as some people hate to say that, empirically, that's what's indicated. And again, just because he tagged Jubito doesn't mean that claim is negated. His power level is volatile. It fluctuates greatly. There's these great spikes. It's literally like the stock market. At one point, he's blitzing on the Hokage. The next, he's getting tagged by Tobirama. There's these spikes in power. It's very blatant, both physically, based off the empirical evidence, and based off the mental anguish he's clearly experiencing, right? From the beginning of the war arc up until the point that the Ten Tails was extracted from him. Very obvious. It's not a shocking claim to make. So more than likely, Tobirama's slower and probably would lose the altercation. As far as the Nine Tails, I'm going to be fair to Tobirama. I think he'd do better than Swag and Thunder God gave him credit for. I do believe that there's a possibility he could teleport away 10-tail Bijou bombs. There's a possibility, theoretically, that he could do so. Is it less likely than Minato being able to do so? Yes, he has slow reaction time. But he would do all right. Now, would he defeat the Nine Tails? That's a whole debate I don't want to get into. I've talked for quite some time. The point is, he would do better. Either way, Obito would be the main threat, and it's highly unlikely that he would defeat Obito anyway. He would simply just lack the speed to react to or against Obito. It's as simple as that. And again, all the empirical evidence and context I provided substantiates that highly. But again, I had to take my time with this one because the scaling I've seen thrown around for Tobirama, especially for the pro-Tobirama side, I must say is very, very intuitively dishonest and quite disingenuous.